I wanted to take a moment to recognize three new executive committee members. If you all recall, during our January meeting, we heard from our fellow council member, Drew Hill, that he needed to take a step back from leading the legislative committee, and we were in need of volunteers to step up to lead that committee. Both Alex Navaez and Morningstar Large have volunteered to serve as co-chairs for that committee, and I just wanted to recognize you both and say thank you for stepping into this leadership role. I would also like to recognize Tashawn DeVille as she stepped up to join the leadership of the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee, as both Jimmy and Clinton have identified that it is time for them to transition out of their chair roles. Thank you to Sean for volunteering to join the leadership team for the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee. We look forward to learning from all three of you as you make these roles your own. We will now move on to our next topic, our biennial report recommendations. Before we jump into that, I did want to say that I think as of right now today, it would be best not to vote on recommendations. I think one more round of drafts would be great in light of the new data that we had seen today, and also the fact that we still have 6 vacant positions on the council. So I wanted to put that out there that I think that that is a great idea. And as we continue to prepare our recommendations for the biennial report to the governor, the key findings from our Washington State Center for Court Research partners are going to be essential for informing today's discussion. Though we all have significant individual and collective experience in the juvenile system itself, as well as adjacent systems, we still need data to provide the complete picture. As we discuss the draft version of our recommendations to be included in this year's biennial report to the governor, let's keep in mind what we learned in the key findings presentation today so data can inform our decisions. To begin, I would like to remind everyone that during our last meeting in January, we reviewed our 2024 biennial report recommendations and provided time for members to share their thoughts on maintaining these recommendations to include necessary edits for the upcoming report. There were no requests to significantly change or remove any of our recommendations. Therefore, the executive committee asked OJJ to update the recommendations in light of progress made over the last 2 years since our last report was published. I ask that you reference the draft recommendations Jenny sent out to us all last Thursday, prepared by OJJ staff. I hope you have had time to review prior to today's meeting, as we are looking forward to a productive discussion. I'm going to invite Jenny to facilitate our discussion on the recommendations so I can also fully participate in the discussion. Jenny, I'll pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Ayana. Okay, so we're going to just dive right in. I think the main thing I want to start with is that in the past 2 years, several other groups have issued or produced recommendations, strategic plans, are working on reports, are working on research, and incorporating those recommendations, research reports, and strategic plans like Washington Thriving, that strategic initiative that was published last year, into the Partnership Council's report recommendations, I think would be an awesome way forward to incorporate those. The more agreement we can share with the legislative branch and the executive branch around all the different entities that are saying similar things, I think it creates a groundswell of voices. And if we can do that, I think that would be really beneficial for the council's report to the governor. So in these next slides, as we're looking at the summaries, the edits, there's going to be some recommendations for how we can incorporate, or the question, I guess, for how do we incorporate those other recommendations and reports into this final version. And so I'll be referencing different reports and different organizations or agencies that we might want to tie in as we go. And then if there's any that you know of that we're missing, that a report came out from a specific agency or another research body that would be really important and effective to name in our recommendations, please feel free to recommend those as well. So I'm going to just dive right into the first recommendation, which was to eliminate the use of large institutional facilities. If you reference the draft that was sent out, there are several objectives that list the way to do that. And the summary of edits, there's a progress portion that identifies progress since 2024. Thank you to the government affairs team within DCYF helping to write that, to kind of explain what's happened in the legislative landscape and the funding and the directions that DCYF has received in the capital budget, to expand capacity with smaller facilities. There was language included in the capital budget to consult with experts in trauma-informed juvenile justice policies and facility design, which is really exciting. That was a very clear recommendation in this section around using trauma-informed care and therapeutic design in the actual facilities itself. It hasn't happened yet, but there's a direction to do so, to incorporate that, which is really exciting. And then, as we talked about earlier in the JR capacity planning town hall, there's also that direction to like, what's the timeline for moving out of Harbor Heights into these other spaces as a smaller facility, one on the east side of the Cascades, one on the west side. Once they come online, what does that look like? So lots of progress, lots of change in the past 2 years since these recommendations were put forward. And the updated draft just includes language referencing the 2025 and 2026 capital budgets in the objectives. The objectives haven't changed drastically. We did change the number of beds. That was the main change. I think in the council's recommendations last time, we said 20 to 30 beds. The language in the capital budget said less than 50 beds. And so we just matched that language to be in support of what that is currently doing. Do council members have any questions, suggestions around the language in the current draft with the objectives on this recommendation? Yes, Rep. Levitt.
Thank you. It gives me a little bit of pause, I'll admit, from the legislative realm of move to eliminate the use of large institutional facilities. And I understand why that recommendation comes forward, but until such time we have options available to us in our local communities, this really kind of resembles the efforts that we've been talking about for community residential beds in terms of healthcare, or for folks with developmental disabilities. It's kind of similar recommendations come forward, and yet we don't have the facilities and local communities to be able to move towards that effort. And so until in such time we have that, I think those efforts need to come first to start to build out the infrastructure in communities all across the state. And we just don't simply have the policy proposals put forward at this time to do so, nor the investments. I think in the healthcare space, we've made significant investments to add beds in different places for healthcare, behavioral health, et cetera. And so we are moving in the right direction to build out the infrastructure. Same with homes for folks with developmental disabilities, acute developmental disabilities, et cetera, but we're not there yet. So I just feel that this recommendation may be a bit premature. It may set up expectations that as a legislative body, we simply can't realize. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one? Please note we'll be taking all of this in and looking at the draft language for potential revisions. So we'll make note of every single suggestion, and we'll be sharing OJJ summary of that and potential language changes or proposal options with the executive committee. And then all council members will have a chance to see another draft and provide feedback again. So this isn't the last chance for that, but we're going to just take it all in. So anything else anyone would like to share on this recommendation and the subsequent objectives that are listed under it in your draft document? Okay. I'm going to move on to the next recommendation. This recommendation focuses on increasing the use of sentencing alternatives and eliminating justice by geography in sentencing. The progress since 2024 that I'd like to highlight is there have been attempts in both past legislative sessions to expand sentencing alternatives in one way or another. Those attempts were also tied to other pretty significant changes within the juvenile justice system, and so they were not passed by both chambers. And so we don't have current RCW language expanding sentencing alternatives at this point. Also, since the 2024 report, which did recommend expanding eligibility for option B, the Sentencing Guidelines Commission did take up the issue of looking at sentencing alternatives, not only for the juvenile justice system, but also for the adult system. They started with option Bs. They actually made 5 recommendations, which just this week I received what those recommendations were. They've worked all the way through. They have, of those 5, been approved. I did reach out to the Sentencing Guidelines Commission, to Carrie Ann, thank you, Carrie, for just clarity on timing. When might we see a report and formal recommendations made? And she expects that the goal is to have that done before the next legislative session, but they still have to get through the remainder of the sentencing alternatives options for the juvenile system and look at the adult system sentencing alternatives options, because they're going to do a complete report on both. And so we don't yet have a report to reference, but I do have recommendations to share. So their recommendations are on the next 2 slides, and I'm going to go through them. These are higher level recommendations. The details for which, how to get there, are not necessarily identified in the documents that I have. And so I can't necessarily answer a ton of questions on them, but it's something we'll be looking out for and that we'll share with the council once that report is complete. But the first recommendation was to allow youth to receive multiple option B dispositions. This was the primary objective, or the first objective under this recommendation, that a prior option B does not disqualify a young person from receiving another option B. Now, the language that the Sentencing Guidelines Commission identified was that this is discretionary. Judicially, it is not a requirement or a guarantee that a young person does receive a second or third or however many option Bs, but it does allow it to happen instead of restrict it from happening. So that's their first recommendation. Their second recommendation was to add factors for judicial consideration when it comes to subsequent option B, so that judicial officers have some guidance for what they should be considering when deciding whether or not to provide any subsequent option B dispositions. There's also a recommendation to allow unlawful possession of a firearm to be option B eligible, which allows for discretion. It's not a requirement or a guarantee. There was a pretty significant presentation that was done to for the Sentencing Guidelines Commission to get to these recommendations. All of their meetings are recorded. They're on TBW. Their minutes are posted. The conversations they've had for how they landed to these recommendations are publicly available. So if at any point you are wondering how they landed on this recommendation or why, that information is available. And I can direct you to it if you would like to dig in to those minutes and watch those conversations. In addition to these 3 recommendations, they had a recommendation to allow assault to offenses to be eligible for option B when a youth is age 14 years or older. The reason why they're recommending this is because assault to offenses are diversion eligible. And so they thought it was strange that it could not be eligible for an option B. They believed that was an oversight in the RCW and are recommending it get corrected. And then finally, recommendation 5 is they are recommending that the legislature clarify the option B statute to be consistent in the reference to class when it comes to adult offenses or categories when it comes to juvenile offenses. So it's really clear about who's eligible for option B dispositions. So in light of the recommendations from the Sentencing Guidelines Commission that go even farther than the initial recommendations from the Partnership Council. My question is, would the council like OJJ to work on drafting language to reference these recommendations in their biennial report recommendations to the governor? Alex?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I also wasn't sure, and I can certainly like kind of look more into things, but the recommendation for why is there the age? Unless I'm
I might
missing
be
something, I don't think the
might
assault
be able
to.
to answer that. So let me
Okay.
pull up really quickly. um, the age. Because right now, the RCW says they
Oh,
are
yes, for option
ineligible
B.
if
Yeah, I
they're
see.
over 14. So under 14 already were eligible. So they're just saying also over 14.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Chanel?
Can you confirm what document you're looking at? Was it emailed on the 9th of April? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing because it's
Yes, it was emailed last Thursday. I think that was the 9th. It's the document that looks like it's titled Recommendations Draft.
yeah, okay. I
Mhm.
printed that up. I don't know. I just must have trying to make sure I follow
And
along.
then we're
Thank you.
looking at the recommendation 2, and it's on, oh, I don't have page numbers on here. It's
It's
technically
okay.
on page
I see
4.
it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Mhm. So since we don't have a report yet to reference, I can work with Carrie Ann from the Sentencing Guidelines Commission to figure out the best language for our recommendations for the council to say, yes, we like these. These are a good idea. Do that. In addition to the other objectives that are already listed, to include incentivizing the use of option B with more local resources to local communities, and then also reevaluating and modernizing the juvenile sentencing grid, which I believe is on the list for the sentencing guidelines to commission to take up. So they're already kind of seeing that down the road once they get through the dispositional alternatives work that they're doing. So considering this recommendation, generally the objectives within it, there are 3. We would be looking at adding some additional language in Objective A to reference the Sentencing Guidelines Commission's recommendations. Are there any changes or feedback, concerns, comments that the council would like to provide to OJJ as we're working on a updated draft? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item. And we will just work on incorporating the Sentencing Guidelines Commission recs to those objectives. Recommendation 3 focuses on establishing diversion as the primary response for the majority of juvenile referrals across the state. That starts on page 6 of the document that was sent last week. Lots has happened since 2024. There was bills that occurred in 2025 legislative session that removed diversion from the criminal history for young people, removed parents and guardians' ability to decline a diversion agreement, and instructed the Washington State Center for Court Research, I need to fix their acronym here, to support improved statewide data collection and reporting on diversion specifically. The Partnership Council also hosted, along with Stand for Children and LCYC, a diversion summit in Yakima in the summer of 2025. And the Washington State Center for Court Research began their work on improved data collection and reporting around diversion. Their first of 2 reports comes out this summer in July. Our hope is that we will be able to reference that report in the recommendations in the final version. And I actually have sent this section to Dr. Lindsay Beach at the Washington State Center for Court Research, because she is the researcher doing this project right now. So she's going to be reviewing the recommendations and the objectives and helping us with that progress since paragraph to make sure that we are using the right technical language about what has occurred with their research. And we may we're offering to the council, basically asking the question if the council would like us to work to include recommendations that might be coming out of that report in this section as well. Any questions on this one? Right now, we haven't made any edits to the objectives because they're still in line with the council's recommendations, and the reports have not come out in order to advise the council to adjust those recommendations in any direction as of yet. So we can keep them as they are and reference or link Whisker's report in July, unless there are any recommendations from the council to consider changes at this time. All right, I'm going to hearing none. We're going to stick with what we've got and move on to the fourth recommendation, which was to dismantle the school to prison pipeline while strengthening the cradle to career pathway. The reason for this language is because there's a lot of preventative objectives listed under this recommendation that span school, that span mental health and substance abuse treatment, the nurse-family partnership. There's a lot in there regarding prevention and getting services to youth and families early to keep them out of the juvenile justice system altogether. The progress made, I think a huge thank you to Diana and her team and all the folks at HCA and those that helped. The Washington Thriving Strategic Plan was published last year. It is quite comprehensive. I've been digging into it and found that there are several points of alignment in that plan's first initiatives, as they're calling them, with the objectives within the Partnership Council's recommendations. I did a little crosswalk because I think that the recommendation here would be to point to the Washington Thriving Strategic Plan within these recommendations, specifically because it is now identified as a statewide initiative. And I just want to share that crosswalk really quickly because it's exciting to see that the council was hearing things and seeing things and sharing things accurately from what other community members and other agencies and organizations were seeing. We're on the same page, which is really exciting. The Washington Thriving First Initiatives, Initiative 2, and I'm going to, for anybody that would like to follow along and may not have a quick link available to them, I'm going to drop a link to the Washington Thriving Strategic Plan in the chat. And if you want to look at the initiatives that I'm going to be referencing, they are on page 67 and 68. For Initiative 2, that's around supporting perinatal well-being. That initiative identifies developing a plan to advance culturally responsive, non-stigmatizing perinatal mental health screening and care to mothers. And then to develop a shared action plan to build family-centered SUD treatment services for pregnant and parenting people that keep families together. So that was in the Washington Thriving Strategic Plan. The PCJJ recommendations from 2024 identified in this priority area that a recommendation to expand through additional funding and structural supports the Nurse Family Partnership Program to be offered to parents no matter their age, regardless of first-time parent status and income level. And so these two, they're not the exact same language, but they're speaking to the exact same population, providing supports to parents of little ones to get everybody their best start and keep families together. And so this is a really exciting consistency between these two reports and their recommendations. And then the other crosswalk has to do with Initiative 3, and that's K through 12 student behavioral health. Washington Thriving identified that they would work with partners to clarify the important ways schools can support students' behavioral health and advocate for scaling the role of students' assistance professionals in schools. And the Partnership Council's recommendation specifically named student assistant professionals in that program and supporting them in every single elementary, middle, and high school by increasing state funds to that program. So as you can see, there's a pretty strong connection between these two reports, and the recommendation would be for OJJ to go back to the objectives that match and to speak to the Washington Thriving Strategic Plan, if the council is in support of making those edits. Diana, I think you are here. Yes. Hi, Diana. I know that I'm
Hello.
talking about what you have led, so hopefully I did an okay job. Are there any additional comments? Oh, thanks. Comments or clarifications or suggestions that you would like to share with us to help our next steps in drafting?
I don't know if it will help in next steps of drafting. I love
Okay.
this.
Okay.
And the connections and coordination. I do have one thing I'll also put out there that isn't as concrete of a recommendation. In the Washington Thriving Strategic Plan, if you go to the bottom of the page that you're probably on and look at dimensions, in dimension 3, the idea is that everything that we build or fund or put in systemically, that it is rooted in system of care values, which is like capital S system of care, which is the top 3 of those values and principles is that it's led and guided by lived and living experience, that it's culturally and linguistically attuned. I can never remember the third one. I apologize. But it's also one that from my work with this committee, our work here does those things. And I think there are ways to demonstrate and show folks who aren't familiar with how to work in that way, how that can look and how that can be. So just, I don't know how to articulate that in a plan but I want to say it out loud to this committee because I say it in a lot of spaces and I don't think I've said it here to you.
Thank you, Diana. So does the council have, is the council supportive of incorporating the Washington Thriving references and language into these recommendations in the next draft?
I'm in support of it.
Rep. Levitt?
I am as well, having worked on Washington Thriving. I think there's a definite nexus between the two.
Wonderful, thank you. Alex, is that a me too?
Yeah, agreed.
Awesome.
And just wanted to
Awesome.
say, like, thank you so much for, like, everyone who put so much work into this. I was kind of got the preview of it from the other meeting we had, but yeah, it's yeah, I agree. Let's include it.
Awesome. Okay. All right, so those are the 4 current recommendation buckets with several recommendations within them. And based on what I've heard, we're going to look at the language around recommendation 1, based on Rep. Levitt's feedback on infrastructure not quite being there. We're going to look at the diversion recommendation specifically to see how we can tie in or reference the report coming out of Whisker. And then we'll do some drafting on the option B or sentencing alternatives recommendation to see how we can reference the recommendations from the Sentencing Guidelines Commission. And then we'll also do the same under recommendation 4 with Washington Thriving. And we'll get a draft ready and share that with the executive committee in May. And then we'll look at sharing that out for the full council to provide feedback. And hopefully, I think, Ayana, did we discuss a vote in July?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, we'll be working on that. I did want to, I have next slide is blank because we'd heard a lot of information, as Ayana had mentioned, from the Washington State Center for Court Research and their key findings. And just because we have 4 recommendations doesn't mean we can't add recommendations. And so wanted to provide time just in case there are any additional recommendation proposals that council members would like to bring up for OJJ to look at, provide information, data, feedback, potential crafting around any additional recommendations that the council would like to be considered for this report.
Yeah, I would like to include a recommendation. And obviously we're gonna have to do some like word changing and shifting. I would like to ask that we recommend like a pilot program with like appropriations funding or different streaming revenue specifically for tribes who are trying to develop their own juvenile court systems. And I think this really ties into justice by geography and eliminating like financial barriers for tribes who are in more rural communities. Um, and yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. And if anyone has anything that they want to add or say, Kendra.
Sorry, you threw me off guard. So yes, even though my hand was up. So as you all may know, I am currently working with our incarcerated youth out of the JR facilities, and a lot of times they're talking about that connection piece, which has really, especially at Harbor Heights, with them having a little more leniency up there, I guess you can say. That connection piece and just having that time with their counselors, their family has really helped them in their rehabilitation. And so I would love to see some type of family intervention, um, because I mean, families go up and they visit or whatnot, but what does that look like? In the prevention and the intervention side. I know getting into the high schools and doing some intervention, we're partnering with Choose 180 to try, and which is a divergent program, but they're also out in our high schools now to help our youth that are maybe system involved, court involved, kind of get through school and be that mentor for them. But and we're always talking about getting the individual ready for reentry, but we never talk about getting the family as a whole ready for reentry and ready for that young person to come back. So just looking into that family intervention piece and how do we unify the family and get them ready for reentry as well, or prevent system involvement altogether.
I just
Thank
want to
you.
second that. Thank you.
Kendra, did I capture this well enough to help us with future conversations?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other recommendations to consider?
I do have a question. I don't really understand what mental health looks like inside.
Mm.
And maybe this is a question or a conversation I can have with Jennifer offline, but around mental health, and that being a continuum when youth release. Because they have all the therapy and all of the good stuff pre-release, but post-release is just kind of left on the table. So post-release mental health services. That's all I got.
Okay. May I make one potential recommendation for consideration to add to this list, Ayana?
Yes, go ahead.
From what I heard with the data report for key findings from Whisker from Dr. Peterson, the challenge regarding data quality from our law enforcement partners, I think is of all of the findings, one that we could make a really clear recommendation on, making improvements to, that the Partnership Council doesn't have the necessary authority to make happen, but others do. And so would it be acceptable for the council for us to draft potential recommendations around that key finding?
I think that that's appropriate.
Okay. Thank you all for that. OJJ will take these recommendations and try to build them out a bit and provide them to the executive committee in May for review, feedback, and then additional review by the full council. Reading your comment in the chat right now, Jennifer said JR is engaging in the Medicaid transformation work, and perhaps she can provide some information to pass along to the council that describes the reentry supports that is providing pre-release and continuing into the community in a more integrated way. That would be great. Okay. All right, I believe this portion is finished, and I can pass it back to you, Ayana.
Alrighty, so thank you all for that discussion. OJJ will prepare an updated draft of the recommendations based on today's discussion. Jenny, is that going to be provided in May or July now?
We'll provide a first round to the executive committee in May for refinement, and then we'll get it to everybody in June so that there can be hopefully some written responses to that language that we can refine one more time prior to July, because the hope is that the vote in July would be final and that there would not be any additional need for changes at that point.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Written feedback and additional recommendations can be submitted to Jenny via email, which will be compiled and shared with the executive committee in June. A final draft of the recommendations based on all additional feedback will be prepared and shared with members prior to our July meeting, which we will then hold a vote in July on the final draft of the recommendations. We are going to be moving into our labor equity discussion. 2 weeks ago, Jenny sent out on my behalf an email containing my perspective on the current division of labor among council members. I would like to read those remarks now, and after I've read them, 2 of our fellow council members and members of the executive committee, Jashawn and Kendra, will assist in facilitating our follow-up discussion. As Vice Chair of the Washington State Partnership Council on Juvenile Justice, I want to raise an issue that I believe requires intentional and immediate attention from us all. Our council's leadership structure is proudly diverse. We have strong representation from BIPOC members in chair and co-chair roles, which reflects important progress. However, representation alone is not equity. In practice, the members who are most active, most responsive, and carrying the bulk of the council's substantial work are disproportionately our BIPOC members. This imbalance is not accidental, and it is not neutral. Historically, the labor of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color has been relied upon, extracted, and often unrecognized, particularly in spaces centered on reform, justice, and equity. Too often, BIPOC individuals are expected to both lead and educate, to carry institutional momentum, and to do the emotional and intellectual labor required to push systems forward. And that pattern cannot be replicated here. It is not the responsibility of BIPOC members to educate others into engagement. It is not our responsibility to overfunction, to compensate for disengagement. Equity work requires shared labor. It requires everyone to be willing to sit in discomfort, to self-educate, to ask hard questions of themselves, and to step into active contribution, not only when it is easy or convenient. OJJ staff have acknowledged that the current distribution of engagement and workload is inequitable. That recognition is important, but recognition alone is insufficient. We must now move towards structural and cultural changes that ensure shared accountability. This conversation is not about blame, it is about responsibility. It is about ensuring that leadership does not become synonymous with overextension for some and optional participation for others. And it is about aligning our internal practices with the justice values we publicly uphold. During our in-person meeting on April 16th, I would like us to discuss concrete pathways to increase full council engagement, clarify expectations for participation, and create mechanisms that ensure equitable contribution across all members. The executive committee of the PCJJ has already discussed this topic, and we will be working together to facilitate this conversation for the full council in April. If we are serious about justice reform, we must first ensure justice within our own governance. Deshaun is going to take over facilitation from here.
Yeah, thank you, Ayana, for bringing up this really important topic. I volunteered to support this portion of today's discussion because I do believe it's necessary for all of us to reflect on this topic and share our perspectives with one another. And so, yeah, kind of going in line with what Ayana just shared, following the discussion we had as an executive committee, obviously not wanting to take away from the fact that we are seeing largely that it is a lot of our BIPOC members really helping to further a lot of the work and taking on a lot of that labor in an inequitable way. I also want to acknowledge that one of the major takeaways I had from the conversation was just the very wide and diverse range of talents, skills, expertise, and perspectives that all of the council members bring, and just really wanting to, wanting to just sit with that for a second and also recognize that that's intentional. We do that so that we can have these very diverse conversations that showcase different perspectives in various different ways. And so I would like to also invite some of my fellow executive committee members to maybe share some of their thoughts and reflections from our previous conversation that we had in February, March around the challenges of labor equity amongst our membership. So if any other executive council members want to come off mute and maybe also share what some major takeaways they had from that conversation. Or even be some like personal experiences that you have around labor equity and just your experience on the council.
This is Ada. I've served on several committees on the council on because I love the work, but I've never stopped long enough to look to say, hey, you're doing a lot. But I was doing a lot also because I enjoyed moving forward the mission of the council and what we were doing. But now that you've mentioned it, maybe I should have stepped back and let others or maybe others should have said, hey, Ada's doing a lot. So from personal experience, I've done a lot, but I've also enjoyed it.
Thank you, Ada, for sharing that. As you are one of our more longer sitting council members, it is really important to hear your perspective since it just has so much like historical context. So thank you for sharing that. I also see Kendra has their hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to speak a little bit to what labor equity looks like in practice, right? So, especially in community, those fair chance hiring and not excluding people because of their backgrounds, of course. Living wages, not just minimum wages. Clear career pathways and not just entry level jobs. A lot of our youth are just getting into like food services and warehouse, which is fine for the time being. I actually encourage it a lot of times when I'm like, hey, stack up your money, go get your, credential or whatnot. But also access to supportive services. So housing, transportation, childcare, as I just mentioned, mental health, and then also employers investing in training and advancement and not just hiring, because we get our guys, we get our youth, trained up in facility with like basic certifications, but how do we get them prepared for, even if they have DLC time, how do we get them prepared to move along in the training if they've had, let's say for instance, wood shop or construction at Green Hill? How do they transition to a DLC facility and continue that training to be able to advance and get the credential attainment they need for when they release, and then getting into that job placement to be able to get down to that career pathway. So that's just a little bit about how I feel about labor equity in practice.
Thank you, Kendra. I think that perspective is really important, especially as we're considering wanting to recruit more youth within this council space. Maybe some of the things that they may need to be most successful and to thrive in a council kind of environment. Those are really important things to consider. Any other executive council members feeling inclined to share?
So this is Alex, and I'm gonna have to step off in a few minutes, but I just wanted to thank you all for kind of flagging this. And I think perhaps what Ada was sharing is like exactly how that cycle works, right? Is like we take on a lot and then sometimes don't even realize it because we do want to be in this space and we do want to help out. And we are here because we want to be here and help make a positive impact, right? And so I feel like I kind of was even just reflecting on being a newly co-chair with Morningstar on the legislative committee, and kind of just have had my wheels turning of potentially like connecting with Morningstar to see like how can we potentially engage other folks into that committee a little bit more, so that it can be a better distribution of kind of what we want to accomplish there, right? And kind of in reflecting, I think we want to make sure, folks are certainly like being on the council in of itself is important, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work also is what I've noticed before we even get to these quarterly meetings. And so making sure that that behind the scenes work is equally distributed, I think is a good conversation we should definitely have and continue to revisit over the course of, the months to come. And I think especially as we're losing, again, I feel like we're losing so much of this internal knowledge of folks who have been here for like many years who are now going to be transitioning out. I think it's even more important to make sure that as a whole council and as a team in this work that we all rise up to play a part on that team. So thanks again for flagging this issue.
Yes. Thank you so much, Alex, for chiming in on this subject. It is really important that we do recognize we do have many more senior members of the council who will be transitioning off. And so, as you mentioned, there is a lot of behind the scenes work that kind of helps to supplement the work that we later do in these meetings. And it's going to be really important that we have individuals who, as we know, everyone wants to be here, right? But I think, and I don't exactly remember who said it in our executive meeting, but we talked a lot about how sometimes you see people like Ada and Jimmy who have been here so long and they're killing it and they're so knowledgeable and they like move with this effortlessness. We're just kind of a little bit intimidated, but like how can we enable our council members to feel as though like, yes, we want new fresh perspectives kind of infused with maybe some more historical perspectives and just helping to continue on and pass that torch. We also talked a lot about how we'll be moving into our 3-year goals pretty soon. And so a lot of that will be helping to lead the direction of where we go as a council. So it's going to be really nice to see some new kind of perspectives to be considered in that process as well. And so, yeah, I want to thank my executive committee members for sharing, and now turn it over to the rest of folks to see if anyone else has any other thoughts or things to share around labor equity or just experiences or thoughts or reflections.
This is Diana. I'll just share. I appreciated the email and the ability to start thinking about it through the lens of how I show up, how I support those who are showing up, and where that should or could look different or tuned differently. So we'll just say I'm definitely thinking about it. I'm grateful for the conversation, and I'm open to any feedback over time as things come up. If I'm open to feedback. So I'm grateful for the conversation. Thank you.
This is
Thank
Andrew.
you.
I'm also very grateful for this conversation. I feel like I'm brand new. This is my second meeting, and I'm one to sort of usually sit back and watch for a while and try to figure out what's going on and what everybody's roles are and what my role might be, my most productive role might be in this group. So I want to solve this problem. I don't know that I have a solution, but I think it's something we all need to think about and engage in. And it's certainly been provoking for me, and it's challenged perhaps my approach to when I'm newly joining a board or something like that. Like I said, I tend to kind of sit back and try to figure out the lay of the land and where my strengths might be most helpful. But I guess the question I have, and maybe it can or can't be answered today, is what is the process for getting people to step forward? I mean, do we have a what that maybe the process is what we need to look at, and um, how we put forth these opportunities, how we encourage them, how people are chosen for these workhorse types of positions. That's one of the things that I'm not understanding, and maybe that's something that can be shared with me so that I understand that if there can be more fairness in the process or more deliberation in the process of getting people into these roles. I guess that's one of the questions that I have.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing that. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of when I was going cold plunging with my friend, and they were like, "Dude, you just got to go in. You just got to go all the way in the water." And I kind of look at like I also did the same thing as when I came to the council, kind of like scoping out the scenery, seeing what the vibes were, and over time, I definitely became a lot more comfortable. But just to give that advice, not only you, but maybe some of our other newer council members, it's okay to just really dive in and kind of learn as you go, I think is something that I've been learning from my experience, at least. In terms of selection and recruitment, from my understanding, it's kind of a combination of both informal and formal processes. And maybe Jenny could speak a little more toward that.
I'm happy to. Often we do a call at a meeting to say if anybody's interested, these positions are available. And we might do that via email as well. So it isn't a really formal process at this point, but I appreciate that you brought up solutions, like how do we fix it? And we will be talking about that too. So we do want to get to action. So I really appreciate you flagging that. I know that Kendra is going to be leading that portion here in a moment when we get to action. So I don't want to speak too much or speak on behalf of. So I'll step back and continue listening and just kind of pass it back to you, Tashawn, to facilitate for those others that still want to share.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I see Ada's hand next up.
Yeah, I just want to say to everyone, it's just a matter, and ditto, you were reading my brain, Sean, just dive in. We all came here with a lot of tools, right? We're smart people. We've done a whole lot of different things, and we're all here for the good of the youth and what we do. And so I didn't know, I mean, I know grants, but I didn't know this grant system, and I knew how to be on an executive board. And whenever a position didn't get filled, and then they asked me would I do it, I just said, yeah, but um, it wasn't that I needed to know their entire rule or their SOP or an RFP I learned it as I went because I brought tools with me, and you all were selected because of the tools that you bring with you. And anybody that I see on here right now can do any of these committee works because I didn't come in here knowing what to do either. So just jump in, do it like she said, and you'll find it so rewarding. Just don't jump in and take them all in like I did it. But at the time, there was no one else doing it either. So I didn't want to leave OJJ without anyone doing it. But you can do it. And There may not be a written book for it yet, but I think a lot of things we are working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada, for that another nugget of knowledge. Jennifer, I see your hand up.
Can't hear you.
Thanks, Ada. I appreciate the conversation, and I'm probably feeling a little bit like Andrew. I'm 6 months in and trying to just kind of learn the lay of the committee. So I appreciate at least grace in allowing me as a new person to do that. And I would appreciate, and it sounds like Jenny may be able to provide this, more information about what role expectations are. Because what I don't want to do is agree to do something and fall short. I'm my calendar is ridiculous. I mean, just like Christina didn't want to show hers, I'd be embarrassed to show mine. What I don't want to do is not be able to show up for meetings that I'm expected to be at because I've signed on, I've made a commitment to do a thing, and I want to be able to do it well and fully. So I think just having a better understanding, or maybe if there's some collateral documentation around this is what the things are, this is what the expectation is, this is what the time commitment is. Because I know, like, some of the subcommittees that I've showed up at, I'm deeply impressed with the amount of work that goes into that. And I'm intimidated that I may not be able to do that, given just some of my other commitments, which I know everybody has other commitments. So that's in no way, shape, or form not recognizing that. I just want to be able to deliver on what I commit to. So that's where my trepidation comes from, and I just want to learn more.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. And as Jenny shared, we'll be working on getting more information out to the rest of the council around time commitments and expectations. Again, I just was added on as the new co-chair of the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee. And so I can say everything you just said was exactly how I was feeling like 2 months ago. I was like, whoa, this is a lot. There's a lot of moving pieces. And I just don't know if I'm going to be able to carry it with everything else I'm carrying. And what really grounded me was how flexible and responsive the staff are, and how it really feels as though they work to not necessarily individualized meetings, because obviously the meetings happen on a regular schedule, but in terms of like that workload and how that collaborative relationship between chairs, co-chairs, and the staff are. And so I can say that that's been really grounding and very helpful. And so, as I said earlier, there will be more specific information around roles and expectations, but I recently went through a very similar experience. And I've been having a pretty positive adjustment period through the support of the staff. And so if that's any other further encouragement to let folks know that it is a collaborative process. But I want to thank everyone for taking the time to engage in these reflections. And I'm now going to pass it over to Kendra for further remarks.
Thank you, Tashawn. Super appreciate you holding that space for reflection. Want to help us move into action. So like Ayana shared, this isn't about blame, it's about responsibility. We all have a role in shaping the kind of council experience we want, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us. And the executive committee spent some time thinking through ways we can strengthen that. And while there are a number of ideas, we want to start with the one, which is revisiting our council bylaws. So we're proposing a small ad hoc work group to take this on. You'll see some initial considerations on the slide, and we'd really love your thoughts on this. So if you want to take some time to review, and just let us know, does this feel like the right starting point? And are there other ideas we should be thinking about? Okay, just giving folks a couple of seconds to review the bylaws and items for consideration. I'm sorry, reviewing the items for consideration. So if there is nothing to add or to discuss, we can go ahead and move forward. In terms of next steps, we're proposing about a 12-month timeline, and we're looking for 3 to 5 volunteers to join the work group. The executive committee won't sit on the group since we'll be approving the final version, but we want to make sure this is shaped by the broader council voices. So if you're interested, feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat, and staff will follow up. And thank you all. I will pass it back to Ayana.
Alrighty. Let's see. I want to thank you all for sharing those ideas. The executive committee will be sure to discuss them further at our next meeting. Regarding the next steps on bylaws revision, we have drafted a process to guide this project that we would like to share. As you can see, we allotted, is this mine? I think it is. Hold on. Yeah, so we're inviting 3 to 5 council members to volunteer on this work group. Please note, as identified in our outline, the executive committee will be approving the final version of the bylaws, and as such, will not be participating on this ad hoc work group. We want to be sure to include as many voices as possible on this project to ensure we end up with bylaws that all members can be in support of. If you're interested, like I said, or like Kendra said, feel free to raise your hand now or share in the chat. But I do want to thank Tashawn and Kendra for leading us through that discussion, though this conversation was not the easiest. I want to give a thank you to all those who shared and participated in the discussion. Thank you to those who have volunteered to join the work group to review and revise the bylaws. We appreciate you. We are going to be moving on to our next section now, which is committee reports. We are going to be beginning with the legislative committee. Alexi, I believe you are providing the report for the co-chairs.
Yes, yeah, I wasn't sure if Morningstar was going to be able to stay on, but I know she had another prior engagement, as did Alex. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of briefly go over the goals or what you see on the screen for the legislative committee. And at our last meeting, we actually talked about how those goals connect with the council's 3-year plan, which is the purpose of the committee. Right now, we're in the interim. We're not as active just because there's not active legislation going on. But we're talking about things that happened and kind of moving forward with advancing priorities and focusing on those webinars, trying to be strategic about when those happen. So at the last quarter, it was really exciting. We did do a Hill Day, which we had a couple people attend. I'm trying to think of, see who's here that actually attended the Hill Day. And it was really great. We did just a general tour for people that had never been to the Hill before. Really education on this is how the legislative process works. Like, this is what a hearing room looks like, trying to take away any intimidation that folks may have. And that's something that we'll most likely do again every year. And next year, it's probably going to look really different because hopefully we'll have a youth council and some youth members be a part of that process. But this year it was exciting. We did have some young ladies from Ridgeview join us along with Justice for Girls. They hosted the trip with us. And so it was really great to kind of see them learn that process and get to talk to a couple senators. And it was, I think, like a really great experience. And that was the first time I'd ever been to the Capitol. So it was exciting, at least for me. Yeah, so that was a big thing that happened. And then just moving forward is really, if you want to come to our meetings, please come.
just see what we're talking about. It is not that intimidating. We're not going to assign you a bunch of work because it's very relaxed right now. We're very in like the brainstorming session of how we can highlight the council's priorities that are in the 3-year plan. And if there's any specific ways that we want to do that, that's really what we're talking about in our meetings. So our next meeting is May 20th at 10 a.m. and it's only an hour. So please come and just check it out. I think that's all the updates that I have, Ayana.
Thank you, Alexi. The next report is going to be from Dr. Trupin and Kendra for the behavioral health and reentry.
Thank you. I believe Dr. Trupin had to drop off around 11:30, so I will go ahead and report out. So, just a little
I'm actually
overview.
back on Kendra, but please go ahead. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. So our committee is currently meeting on a quarterly basis with 2 active work groups focused on key priority areas. One being youth mobile crisis response and the other gun violence prevention. So the youth mobile crisis response work group is focused on understanding the current availability of crisis services across the state for youth and families. And through this work, we've identified several key resources and service gaps. So we've included a map and resource list from our partners at Washington Healthcare Authority to help ground this work in what's currently available. If you're interested in going deeper, we invite you to join the next work group meeting on May 5th at 9 a.m. For the gun violence prevention work group, our gun violence prevention work group is moving into collaboration with state partners. So we've scheduled a partner meeting for June 8th at 2:30 p.m. to align efforts and explore how we can work more collectively in this space. And if you'd like to be included, please connect with Jenny to receive that invite. We did have some leadership transition. So as Jenny mentioned in the beginning, Dr. Trupin's term will be ending in November. And so we are beginning to identify that new co-chair. And this is a great opportunity for someone interested in helping lead the work, as we just had that discussion. So please reach out if you'd like to learn more. Overall, our focus remains on strengthening access to behavioral health supports and improving reentry outcomes for youth and families across the state. And I'm happy to take any questions. But just know, just to name it, this work is about making sure young people and families can access support in moments of crisis, not after harm has already occurred. So trying to prevent that crisis. Thank you. And Dr. Trupin, if you wanted to add anything.
All right.
No, I don't.
The next committee report will be the racial and ethnic disparities. Who would like to provide the report for that?
I'll go ahead and step in. Clinton had a busy day. It doesn't look like he was able to make it to join us with today. So our biggest announcement will be that we're welcoming Tashawn as the new co-chair. And I will invite Tashawn just to say a few words. I know I didn't prep you super well, but just if you wanted to just share kind of your kind of thoughts about joining and kind of what maybe one thing you're excited about.
Yeah, I shared a little bit about my thoughts, like more so in terms of like I was really nervous stepping into this when I was kind of on the committee and just been observing a lot. And so hearing of Clinton stepping down from that position, I was like, okay, maybe I could do this. And then I really started to look at it from the lens of like, what policy areas can I help kind of intersect with specific area of like racial and ethnic disparities? I specifically have a huge passion for education related policy. And so I'm really interested to see kind of how to infuse my background in youth education, looking specifically through that lens of racial and ethnic disparities for juvenile justice involved populations, as well as also just like, learning more about the current work that's happening, especially around like data collection, and helping to further. We had a really great discussion in our last ones about furthering consistency around data to help further more accurate reporting. And so there's just a lot of really interesting things that, one, I'm going to hopefully be able to bring, but also things that I think are going to really help expand my knowledge around the work that the council's doing. So really excited about that. I'm also looking for a buddy. If anybody wants to co-chair with me, please and thank you.
Thank you, Tashawn. Yeah, I mean, Tashawn, I think kind of hit all the points in line with the rest of the council. Like kind of the recent activity with the council, racial and ethnic disparities is undergoing kind of a transition, changing of leadership, and kind of looking at succession planning as Jimmy and Clinton look kind of on the horizon of stepping off the council, not until likely 2027, but just with, you know, workload and having both served in those positions for quite a few years, and really encouraging maybe newer council members to kind of, if it piques your interest, to kind of step into that co-chair role. I'll speak to Tashawn and I did almost 3 months, I think, of kind of transition planning and shadowing to kind of get her to the point of like being like, hey, I'm going to be the new co-chair. And so really, I think living up to what does it mean to be supportive in these roles, and how can we as staff also be more supportive of that kind of longer term, more stable transition of leadership. And yeah, Tashawn already hit, we, January and February meetings really focused on expanding what we look at in the reporting. So we're in year 3 of our 3-year racial and ethnic disparities reduction plan. In process of writing the year 2 evaluation. As Jenny said, our reporting portals have not opened and we don't know when that's going to be. So kind of just in a limbo with this, but in the meantime, kind of preparing for what will the next 3-year plan focus on, and having those conversations. And so looking at the OJJDP requires 5 reporting across 5 discretion points. That's arrest, diversion, detention, secure confinement, and then transfer to adult court. So Racial and Ethnic Disparities Committee has identified being interested in doing a little bit of a deeper dive into that data at the county level. I think Andrew's presentation really touched on a lot of that today, as far as like where are those points of like for data improvement, because how much can we build from a very incomplete data set. And so racial and ethnic disparities, I think, will be kind of heading that work in the next couple of years. So, and then Tashawn, if you have any follow-ups, but that's what I have for our report out.
Nope, I'm all good.
All right, we will be moving to Ada for grants and TA.
We can't
Ada,
hear
you're
you,
muted,
Ada.
love.
I had a lot to say. Again, my report is going to be really short and sweet, but again, I want to update you all that I will be leaving this position. I will be leaving on the council in November. I think it'll be 9, maybe 10 years. I know it's been a long time, but with OSPI 10 years in October. And so I would like to identify a chair sooner than later. We don't meet, I don't have it on the top of my head, Jenny, but we don't meet that often. OJJ is phenomenal in helping us prepare for this meeting. And it keeps us on top of the way that we're spending the money, and we get to make some great decisions to bring forward to the larger board. So it's a really exciting committee to be on. I don't think the time commitment is that long. I just don't know it right off the top of my head. And I would like to transition someone sooner than later so they can have about 6 months to work with me before I leave the council. So that to me is pretty exciting. So if you're interested, please contact Jenny or myself so that we can schedule some time and get this going. And to the members of the committee, Diane, I think she's also leaving. I don't know about Dr. Ben Danielson, Alex, Ayana, still on there, Mike Johnson. And again, Jenny has been totally amazing. You're never alone, especially for busy work schedules, like you said. Jennifer, it's really, this committee has been the best fit for me because it doesn't require, I'm like you, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it well. And I've been very successful on this committee, even during the passing of my husband, they were really supported. So enough for that. So I hope I've enticed someone with a mustard seed to join and go on to the next slide. Now time for our committee updates. So these are our current Title II award summary. So we have good news to share. OJJ staff submitted a no-cost extension for our fiscal year 22 award, and it was granted. This extension provides for a new end date of September 30th, 2027. Good news. This will allow us to continue meeting the goals of our 3-year plan from 21 through 23. We will have our fiscal year 21 funds fully expended by the end of this September, and the RFPs we will be providing an update on in our next slide, and they're going to be covered by the fiscal year 22 funds. OJJ will be sure to submit a no-cost extension request for the 23 award early in 2027 to request that award be extended to September 30th, 28. I think that's really good news right there. Good work, Jenny and team. Next slide. The goals from our 3-year plan that we are working on achieving through funding awards include ensuring support for consistent and positive youth engagement through identifying a youth advisory committee coordinator, increasing access to transition and reentry services through the Credible Messengers mentoring model, and passing through Title II Native American pass-through funds to a local Washington tribe. We expect the solicitations to be posted by the end of next week. OJJ staff will email us all the announcement when the solicitations are live so we can forward to our networks. If anyone is interested in joining the Grants and TA Committee and participating in the application evaluation process, please let Jenny know so she can get you added to our committee meetings. Any questions about that? This is exciting. And finally, more exciting news. OJJDP finally announced the 2025 Title II solicitation on March the 18th. That's a big clap. Our application is due by May 4th. OJJ staff will prepare the application and submit prior to the May 4th deadline. This solicitation is for year 2 of the 3-year plan, and OJJ will draft the budget in line with the 3-year plan submitted and approved in 2024. The total allocation for Washington State for the 2025 solicitation is $998,528. Do we have any questions around any of this for myself? And if I can't answer, Jenny. Exciting.
Hey,
Okay.
Ada. Sorry, I have a question. Is it possible, and I don't go back a couple slides, I think it was the 3 grants that those are going to go out for posting, is that right? I think down one slide.
This one.
Yeah. Is there, and I'm sorry if this has already been distributed, but is there a breakdown of the specificity of what these grants are for? I mean, obviously these are broad titles, but is there, does that live somewhere, and can we see a copy of that?
Jenny?
Yes, it does live somewhere. It lives within the 3-year plan from the 2021 through 2023. It names investing in reentry services, but it doesn't get into details of what that looks like. So if you'd like to see details, happy to share the draft solicitations. With the Credible Messengers Transition and Reentry Services, OJJ has been working with Ted Ryle, Eric Nicholson, and Jason Clark on drafting that to make sure it meets the requirements for the Credible Messengers mentoring model for JR, because the goal would be to provide additional access to services on the east side of the state for reentry and transition. So we've been working closely with JR staff around that solicitation. The Youth Advisory Committee, there'll be an update from Ayana shortly on that one, has also details around what we're hoping to receive regarding that coordination. And then the Native American pass-through funds is really broad. The applicants get to respond to say what they want to use the funds for regarding supporting juvenile justice delinquency prevention. But we do have those draft solicitations that are with the contracts and procurement unit within DCYF right now, and would be happy to share them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that question. Yes, Kendra.
So with the Credible Messengers Transition and Reentry Services, is that what the RFP is going to be titled? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, many of us may know that Northwest Credible Messengers is an actual organization. And so my only worry is that folks may think that they're partnering up with Northwest Credible Messengers on this transition and reentry service RFP. So if we could adjust the language, maybe transition and reentry services through the Credible Messenger framework would be more specific. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Kendra. And you are correct. There are no other questions. I'll turn it back over to Ayana. Thank you.
Yeah, before we jump into that, Jenny, could I request that we send out an email sometime within the next week or so, just as a reminder that we have vacant committee chair positions open, and just advertise that there are committees that have spots open as well. Thank you. And finally, I would like to provide the update for the Youth Advisory Committee work group. Myself and Morningstar met with OJJ staff 3 times to advise on how to draft the RFP for the Youth Advisory Committee coordinator solicitation. We also assisted in drafting the questions for the response form bidders will use to submit their applications. Additional youth and young adults from Echo Glen, Green Hill School, and JR community facilities were invited to participate. However, due to scheduling conflicts, they were not able to make our meetings. Youth members on the council, as well as those invited to join the work group to prepare for this RFP, will be invited to continue participating with the contractor once identified in designing the Youth Advisory Committee itself. Please note that Jenny did reach out to both Echo Glen and Green Hill School staff who have been supporting youth and young adults in attending council meetings in the past to share with them an update on this project and how we are hoping to build an infrastructure to support youth engagement across the entire juvenile justice continuum, and that it is our hope that young people in JR facilities will apply to join the Youth Advisory Committee once it is established. Both staff shared their excitement about this direction and believe that we are taking the right steps to support youth engagement in a more relational and restorative way. Are there any questions from the council on this update? Kendra?
Yep. So just wanting to, I love the idea, and I know we've been having this conversation. And I know there are a lot of youth that want to be involved. And so I think it'll be a great way to be able to partner up and coordinate with the My Job program. And I say that because the My Job program focuses, it's the essential programming for our youth for career readiness. And in the My Job program, there is what's called work-based learning. And so we would be able, it sounds like they would be getting trained up in like they have a capital classroom, for instance, right? So being able to get trained up in self-advocacy in with policies and law changes, but we actually can compensate them for being in those groups through the My Job program and the work-based learning piece. So I think that's a consideration to be able to compensate our youth for their contributions and their participation. And the My Job program is in every facility right now. I'm not sure of what facilities they are on the eastern side, but there are about 3 providers for the My Job program, including KJ Jones.
Jenny?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Kendra, around compensation. Part of the budget for the Youth Advisory Committee contract does include lived expert stipends for all the young people that would be joining that advisory committee. So My Job program or not, they will be being compensated for their lived expertise and their time, the trainings they participate in, the projects they work on. And so we'll be having that as part of the contract for sure.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you for sharing. We'll ensure that that experience is put on their resumes.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Chanel's hand up first.
Yeah, just curious, once established, are we going to be reaching out also to community facilities, not just Echo Glen and Green Hill, to make sure, because I really believe that's a really good time to also catch these young folks before they completely transition out on their own. And just from my son's experience, what I'm seeing right now, I really think some of them need to be in this process. They need to be involved. Now that they're out of the actual Green Hill, that type of facility, it's detrimental that they get involved in this type of work now that they're in that community facility. Thank you.
Yes, we do have one young person in one of the community facilities that is on this work group to help draft the work. So yes, we just didn't have engagement from the community facilities prior to young people in those facilities attending council meetings. But that is definitely on the list. We want young people across the continuum, those that have never entered a detention facility but might have done a diversion, those that have had experience in school with maybe suspension or expulsion or special programs in school, all the way to JR, reentry, parole, all of it. So the folks that are on the work group will help with that committee design, and they're young people, and they're going to tell us, how many seats, what are the projects, what are the parameters. They're designing it, and we're there to support and make it happen.
Okay. It may just be the facility my son is at, but I would like to see more promotion or more announcement of what is going on and what opportunities there are for these young folks once they're in the community facilities. It's not getting there. At least where he is. So that's all. I'm just trying to highlight, let's make sure we do a big push on getting the info to those folks as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, the design and the purpose of this youth committee as well is we're having a hope that there is a multi-layer peer support system and peer tutoring system, so that way when the youth members on this council inevitably their terms end or whatever, there's a vacant position, we have youth who are on this youth committee who already have a working relationship with the council, who've been mentored by the youth council members or the youth members on this council, and develop a working relationship and a trusting relationship, so where it can be a smoother transition process. I saw Whitney's hand up.
Yeah, and let me ask a permission from Jenny before I get too far into. Am I allowed to speak to the bidder response form at all as far as like questions, or should I? I know, sorry. I just wanted to
Sorry, this
allude-
is a technical legal term. All of the contractors, the people within DCYF that I've talked to would be like, please don't, because this is
Okay.
a public meeting and people could get a heads up on preparing for responding. But maybe we can say something general about
Okay.
it and how and who drafted it, but not what the questions are.
Just very generally, so like speaking to like what Ayana shared about trying to build in like support systems. We've also, I don't know, what do I say? We've been very intentional and strategic about some of the questions around like supports and making sure that there are supports in place, not only for the young people, but also for whoever ends up in the position. And I hope that's okay to say. That's
That was
all.
a value statement. We care about supports. Yes.
Jennifer Redmond.
No, I just want to, I appreciate kind of what Chanel raised, and I think you as well, Ayana, when you talked about, if I was understanding what you were describing, making sure that there's kind of a good cross representation of youth involvement. I just need to say, I got to put my JR hat on for a moment. Oftentimes there's, you know, the secure facilities become the default, and they represent, albeit a very unique and complex population that's high need. They don't represent all juvenile justice involved youth, and definitely not the majority of juvenile justice involved youth. And so my hope is that there is intention to make sure that there's representation, you know, from whether it's detention, diversion, post adjudication, the whole gamut, just to make sure that there's a good cross section of voice at the table. And then I also just have to reference that I know sometimes it seems like it's really easy for people in our JR secure facilities to have the youth on the ready to participate in these things all the time. They're also taking youth to school, getting them into other programs, taking them to treatment, doing the services within the facility, all during sometimes short staff times. And so there's also a staff capacity issue. And so I just want to make sure expectations are managed, that whatever the ask is, particularly around JR participation, Chanel obviously is familiar with the community facilities. Their staff are out transporting young people to programs in community facilities. So we want to make sure that we're setting it up for success and the young people can be available, and it doesn't conflict with other things that they have going on in their treatment or programming out in the community or within the secure facility. And Chanel, you have my commitment that whatever comes out from this, I'll make sure that it gets filtered out to community facilities, because they do oftentimes not get asked very much. It's typically our young people in secure facilities. So just want to share that perspective.
Is there any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. And for the last item on the agenda, public comment, it is our standard practice to include an opportunity for public comment at each of our full council meetings. Are there any members of the public that would like to share at this time? Okay. I would also like to provide space for members to share any announcements they would like to bring to the attention of the council. Does anyone have any announcements or anything? No? Okay. And then in closing of our meetings, we are going to begin a new practice to encourage time for reflection. I would like to invite council members to share aloud or in the chat one thing that you will carry with you from today's meeting. Perhaps it is something you want to explore or research. Perhaps it is something that you want to act on based on what you've heard today, or a relationship you want to pour into. I can go first while everyone is thinking about what they would like to share. I think I really took away and want to kind of delve more into the data that was presented to us earlier by our partners. I was really intrigued by the amount of tribes that are very behind in data reporting and data sharing. So I want to kind of delve into like what that entails and why that's like a common issue right now. Did anyone else have anything that they would like to share that they would take away from this meeting? Okay.
I'll just share. I'm sad to hear we have a lot of longstanding members leaving, Ada and Eric and a few others. And I was really looking forward to being able to spend more time with them in this group and not other outside things from this group. So wish them well. I'll probably have a couple more meetings with you all, but wish them well, but was sad to hear that.
Anyone else? All right. Well, we are getting off early today from our meeting. Our next quarterly meeting is going to be July 16th. It'll be virtual. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. In the meantime, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
Hi, Jenny.